On today's question of faith, did the Browns sell their soul? Welcome to an Emergency Podcast here on Question of Faith. I'm Mike Hayes, the Director of Young Adult Ministry here in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I'm Father Damian Ferentz, Vicar for Evangelization.
Just us two today, and sound the sirens. The Browns have traded for quarterback DeShaun Watson, who has, to put it kindly, a checkered past.
Alleged checkered past. It's true. A lot of controversy. It's the news of the city this weekend.
Yeah, so 22 women have accused DeShaun Watson of sexual assault during massage therapy sessions. They were all massage therapists, right? And,
correct.
And recently, last week, the grand jury investigation came back and said that there wasn't enough evidence for them to proceed with bringing a case. So when a grand jury meets, they're deciding how much evidence is there, and is there enough evidence for there to be an actual criminal case? Yeah, and then they would look into it further, and then the criminal case would proceed. They said there's not enough evidence to do that. He still has 22 civil suits that will be with the people who are making these accusations, and but because the criminal proceedings are now basically dead, the NFL decided, sort of open things up now, and teams were more apt to go after him, who is a top 5 quarterback in the league. And so the Browns bid, and the Browns won. They sent a number of draft picks, kind of mortgaging the future for this guy who they think probably could lead into the Super Bowl, right?
Yes. So DeShaun Watson, I think he's in his 5th year as a pro.
That's correct.
And as Mike just said, top 5 quarterback, elite status. And we've had in Cleveland Baker Mayfield as our quarterback for the last 4 years. So are they the same draft class? I don't know. Or is he 1 year older? They're around
1 year older, I think.
Okay. And so Baker has had, out of his 4 seasons, 2 very good seasons. And last year he was injured most of the year with that torn labrum. So, yeah, it's a lot of controversy in the city because at first they tried to go after DeShaun, and then DeShaun, I guess, does not like Cleveland weather or cold weather, so he was going to go with Atlanta or the Saints because he was a ball boy for Atlanta, and I think he's from Atlanta originally. And then all of a sudden, Andrew Berry went down, I think, with Stefanski and represented to him after he took Cleveland out of the conversation and said, I'm going to Cleveland. And we offered him $230 million guaranteed dollars over 5 years. That's the biggest NFL contract ever.
Right. And that would make sense for him to want to accept that, especially with probably a mounting number of civil suits coming his way that he's probably going to lose.
Is that right? I don't know.
I would think. I mean,
or will he settle?
Yeah, he'll probably settle, and now he has enough money to settle those cases, was how I was reading that, and because the money's guaranteed, and so even if he's accused and found guilty in the civil suits, now he's able to sort of have some excess cash, if you would, to pay those things off. And that's how a lot of people are reading this. They're like, oh, the Browns basically paid for the civil suits, so this way if he ends up being accused and found guilty, that he can make that happen.
Yeah.
Which is certainly a big moral dilemma on anybody's part, right? You could say, well, wow, should they have done that? That was one of the ways I was looking at this the other day. I was like, that's kind of, I don't even know what the word is. Like, I was like, I wonder if that even went into the Browns' thinking, because I'm sure it went into Watson's thinking.
Yeah. So let me read the statement from Dee and Jimmy Haslam. And
the owners of the Browns, for those who don't know.
Yeah, and it's important that it's Dee and Jimmy. It's not just the husband. It's a husband and the wife who are co-owners of this team. So this is what they say. We spent a tremendous amount of time exploring and investigating the opportunity to trade for DeShaun Watson. We are acutely aware and empathetic to the highly personal sentiments expressed about this decision. Our team's comprehensive evaluation process was of utmost importance due to the sensitive nature of his situation and the complex factors involved. We also understand there are still some legal proceedings that are ongoing, and we will respect due process. It was pivotal that we, along with Andrew Barry and Kevin Stefanski, meet with DeShaun to have a straightforward dialogue, discuss our priorities, hear directly from him on how he wants to approach his career on and off the field. He was humble, sincere, and candid. In our conversation, DeShaun detailed his commitment to leading our team. He understands and embraces the hard work needed to build his name both in the community and on the field. Those in-depth conversations, the extensive evaluation process, his dedication to being a great teammate, and devotion to helping others within the NFL, within the community, and through his charitable initiatives provided the foundation for us to pursue DeShaun. We are confident in DeShaun and excited about moving forward with him as our quarterback and supporting his genuine and determined efforts.
Okay, so that's the owners of the Browns made that statement, and giving some voice to why they decided to go after this guy, and that they did do some due diligence in looking him up. So now you're a longtime Browns fan, and I would say I'm a fairly new Browns fan. Since I moved to Cleveland, I did embrace the Browns. I used to be a Jets fan. Okay, I was never a Buffalo Bills fan. I just wanted to say that for the record to my friends in Buffalo. But what was your knee-jerk reaction when you heard the Browns have acquired DeShaun Watson as a fan?
Surprise. Actually, you were there because I was in the
right.
St. Peter's parking lot right after our meeting on Friday, got in my car, and my brother texted me that Adam Schefter broke this news. And I thought,
you nearly hit
cow.
me with your car.
Yeah, right. But, I mean, on the football side, we have the best running back tandem in the league with Hunt and Chubb. We probably have the best offensive line. We've got a great one in Amari Cooper. Mm-hmm. Jarvis Landry may come back. It sounds like today, even as we're talking, they may sign Jadeveon Clowney back on the defense. So in terms of winning football games, it looks like a good pick. But on the moral aspect, and we obviously work for the Diocese of Cleveland, not for the NFL, but allegations and moral reprehensible behavior, all these sorts of things factor in when assigning someone to a church position. So how does that play in when trading someone or drafting someone who has a checkered past or has allegations or quite a few allegations? And then how does that factor in with the responsorial psalm from this weekend, the Lord is kind and merciful, or the in Jesus's parable, cut this fig down, it hasn't bore any fruit. Okay, let me cultivate and fertilize it, give it one more year. So how does
second chances?
Yeah. So how do we be a merciful people, giving people second chances while also being a just people and making sure that we're not promoting poor behavior just because someone's an excellent athlete?
Yeah. And so my knee-jerk reaction to it initially was, the heck with the Browns. I can't see myself rooting for this team with this guy on it. And, and I was the chaplain of the women's rowing team at Canisius, so I was always sort of like the father, the father who's like overlooking all these women, saying, these guys who are looking at them better take a step back, I'm watching them like a hawk, right?
Right.
It's really rough, on college campuses, sexual assault's a big deal, right? It's more than a big deal. It happens all the time, and I've seen that up close and personal. I've seen women crying in my office about things that relate to this, and seen people share stories on retreat. And I never used to believe all those statistics, right? I was like, oh, come on, that's impossible that, like 89% of women have had these kinds of things happen to them. But I sure believe it now. And 22 women are really hard to ignore. And so when I was like this guy really, I can't believe, even when the Browns are talking about going after him, I was like, oh, I hope they don't go after him. Let the Saints take him. That was my attitude. And then they got him, and I had your initial reaction of surprise. Like I just said, wait a minute, I heard that they were out of the running yesterday. What are you talking about? And I was kind of like, oh, Father Damien doesn't know what he's talking about. I got in my car. I turned the radio on. I went, oh, wait a minute, maybe he does. and so that aside, right, he's here now.
Right.
Now it's happened.
It's official.
And so what do we do with this? For me, I think I'm going to need to see a whole lot more from him in order for me to ever put a Browns jersey on again. And so I'm open to that. But right now, I'm considering wearing a Baker Mayfield jersey in protest for most of the year and seeing what happens. But
well, I have a couple thoughts. One is the Browns or the NFL wouldn't have made him available if the grand jury did not choose to not indict him, right? So if they found him guilty on these charges, he would be in massive trouble and wouldn't be free for being picked up by another team.
Yeah, there would be a criminal case coming forth that would still be that would still be investigating.
And because there's no criminal case that's been brought against him, what do you do with this guy? Do you say he can never play football again? Does he become like some priests who have allegations against them, although not found criminally guilty, still become unassignable? But that's with the Catholic Church. This is not the Catholic Church. This is the NFL.
Right.
And so I would hope, and I think our standards as a diocese are higher than the NFL's, but the NFL still has some sort of standard. And if you remember a few years ago when we acquired Kareem Hunt, it wasn't sexual assault, but it was physical assault against a woman. And there was videotape of that, and that was horrendous. But Dorsey went after him, brought him in because I think he drafted him for the Chiefs. He came. He said he's changed his ways. He got baptized. Freddie Kitchens went to the church. I think it was over in Cleveland Heights or in Cleveland. He was baptized, and Dorsey was there, and Kitchens was there. And in terms of that sort of trouble, he hasn't reoffended. So do you give people a second chance in sports?
Yeah, and Hunt has shown some remorse for what he's done, and there were no criminal charges brought against him by the person who he abused, and I think they've made some sense of amends themselves. I don't think they're still together, but I think that they're it's sort of the incident has passed. Doesn't change what happened, and he admits what he did was wrong. I haven't seen the same level of remorse from Watson, at least publicly. Like, I've seen a lot of denial of, like, no, these things did not happen. The truth will set me free.
Yeah.
Some religious language he's used around that, saying, talking about, God protecting him, I think, or things along those lines. But
I actually don't spend too much time studying sports outside of Cleveland. So
Sure.
I really didn't know too much about DeShaun, except that there were some allegations. I don't know his story well, but now that he's a Brown, I'm very interested to know what's going on here and what he has done and to get to the truth of the matter. But you have people saying he did this and he's saying that he didn't do this, and it's a sticky situation.
To put a fine point on the grand jury investigation, I think we said this a little bit earlier, but a grand jury is looking for evidence, right? And to see if a trial can come forward, a criminal trial can happen. So is there enough evidence to bring criminal charges against this person for them to stand trial in a criminal case?
Mm-hmm.
So they ruled there wasn't enough evidence. Now, historically, in sexual abuse and sexual assault cases, those things are very hard to prove. And there are numbers of sexual assault cases that are thrown out in grand juries for the same things. Let's be clear, that doesn't mean something didn't happen. It means that they couldn't find enough evidence to prove that it happened. 22 women are hard to ignore, Father. I'm just saying, off the top.
I agree that. Yes, I do agree. And I guess the question is, and this was the question of this show, did the Browns sell their soul for rolling the dice on a guy who has all these allegations against him? And if he brings Cleveland to Super Bowl, is it worth it? Do we feel dirty? Is this perpetuating poor behavior?
If he's leading a parade down 9th Street after the Browns win the Super Bowl, do you feel good about it?
Yeah.
If
That's
he's
the
found
question.
if he's found guilty certainly in civil suits, or if we learn more about this, or if he does it again.
Correct.
That's the next thing. If after the Super Bowl, maybe he keeps himself, on the straight and narrow the whole time he's playing, and then after the Super Bowl you find something out about him. Do you feel good about winning the Super Bowl then? The one time you've won the Browns have never won the Super Bowl.
Correct.
And so, So let's just look at the football side for 1 second. Here's a piece of the good news, I guess, if you're a Browns fan. The Browns have said we're going to try to do the best we can to put a winning team on the field, right?
They've exhausted. I mean, they threw everything, the whole house at this. $230 million. They want to win right now.
Right. And that's probably not always been true about Browns owners. I think we could say that there's always been a question, are they willing to spend the money? Are they willing to really go out and do this? So I think we're seeing that the current owners are at least dedicated to that side of it. The next question would be, but at what cost?
Correct. Well, and that's it. Yeah. That's the question. Did they sell their soul? Now, this is important to keep in mind, too. I think every owner wants to win, but what's really hard to do with football is to get an elite quarterback. And how many quarterbacks have we had since the Browns came back in '99? When I was a boy, we had Bernie Kosar. He was elite. He was great, and the city embraced him. And so now the Browns see a guy who's said to be elite quarterback, top 5 in the league. Can we go after him? He has a checkered past. He's done all these things. Are we worried about winning a Super Bowl? Are we worried about how? So do athletes have to be exemplary, and they have to be morally upstanding citizens? And if he is suspended for a few games, if he's found guilty on some charges, what does that look like? Or if he settles and then the victims or alleged victims take a payment and then have like a secrecy clause, then we'll never know what happened.
Non-disclosure.
Non-disclosure, that's what it's called.
Or confidentiality
yes.
agreement, yeah.
So it's tricky. The other person that came to mind too is Kobe Bryant. Remember back in the day, there were accusations against him. And it was actually a Catholic priest that got him to turn his life around, and he did, and was going, if not mass every day, going to church every day, and he was a Catholic.
Yeah.
Actually, people had seen him down here at the cathedral when he was in town in the last 10 years. I know that's true. And the day that he died in the helicopter accident, he visited the Catholic Church to pray that morning. So Kobe Bryant should, after that allegation, we said no more Kobe, or how do you go about making these decisions, and how do you know? Does time tell?
Yeah, I think a show of penitence is probably what I would need to see more than anything else. Like on day one, if DeShaun comes out and says, "Hey, look, I'm going to take 25% of this big salary that I got," or I would hope it would be more than that, frankly, and I'm going to donate that to the domestic violence center here in Cleveland, and I want to really spend some time and learn more about this and spend some time fighting for the cause of people who are victims of domestic violence. And I want to, work real hard on that end. That would show me a little something.
So penitence, repentance, repent and believe in the gospel.
Yeah.
So some conversion you want to see.
Yeah. Good Lenten theme as well for us.
Now, is that, and this is as the director of youth ministry and as a Catholic priest, what does the NFL demand of him? What do his coaches demand? What does the owner demand? How do they go about navigating this? Do they call forth, hey, give us something, like we're all sinners? How does this play in? Or how does it look?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could sort of hear in the statement by the Haslets that they kind of that they're kind of expecting that almost, right? They're like, they talk about his charitable causes. They talk about a couple of things that they kind of trust that he wants to be a solid citizen, things along those lines. So I think that they're kind of ringing the bell a little bit early and saying, "Hey, Mr. Watson, you might want to go in this direction since we're giving you a chance here."
Yeah, they call him humble. Their conversations. He was humble, sincere, and candid. And humility is seeing yourself as God sees you, no more, no less. And it's not that you have to confess every sin publicly to everyone. I mean, that is part of the beauty of the sacrament of confession. But if there are public sins that you're accountable for, to own up to them and ask for forgiveness, there's something there. But again, if he's claiming that this didn't happen, then do you want him to confess to things that he didn't do?
Right. And that's the question. I mean, no one knows what happened yet.
Right.
And it's not that we don't believe victims, and it's not that we don't believe him, right? It's the evidence hasn't been presented enough because the grand jury has said there's not enough evidence to proceed. So now the investigations are sort of stopping. And, I can't make I haven't seen all the evidence. You haven't seen all the evidence.
Right.
We've only seen what's been presented in the media. And, and there's murky things and all of that. It's interesting. I've been part of some cases around sexual assault and seen both sides of this. People's reputations get ruined, and in many cases, rightfully so.
Yeah, well, this is why Jesus says the truth will set you free. Because if we tell the truth, then we'll be free. But obviously, we don't know the truth here, and someone's not telling it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, someone's not telling the truth. And I tend to believe the victims, and 22 is a hard number for me to ignore. So I think that this guy did something.
Yeah.
And
something happened.
Something happens. Right. Something happens. And now we have to deal with that.
Yes. That's it. Did the Browns sell their soul for going after a guy where something happened, but it wasn't necessarily criminal? Or how did you frame that?
Yeah, it wasn't. The evidence hasn't come forth enough for there to be a criminal trial at this point
to bring about an indictment.
Yeah. And so, and now we'll probably hear a lot more about this in the civil cases, and so that's when I think we're going to need to pay some extra close attention and see what happens in that, because I think more evidence will be brought forth there that will go one way or the other.
So here's my answer to the question. I think it's going to be like how Jesus says you let the weeds and the wheat grow together, and then it'll take some time, but you'll figure out if this – it's kind of like how discernment works. When a guy leaves the seminary and he says, I've discerned this, well, we'll see how your life plays out, and you'll know if it was good discernment or not. And in the same way – I think as this thing plays out, not just if the Browns win Super Bowls, but what the man that DeShaun Watson becomes in Cleveland will let us know if the Browns sold their soul or not with this.
Yeah.
I think it'll become obvious over time, and I think it's going to take time to figure out. So there may be Browns fans who say, I want nothing of this, or this is the best thing, and I don't care about moral stuff. I don't think either of those. I think they're too extreme. I think watching this thing play out, and let's see what happens. And I wonder, I wonder if faith, Christian faith, has any role in DeShaun's. I don't know much about the guy at all.
Yeah, he does have a Christian faith and has made some reference to that. I don't know I don't know under what context or what denomination he is, but he definitely has made some references to faith in some of the statements that I've seen him make. The question for me is also consequences, right? So there are consequences to your actions. And I think the question here is now, what consequences should he be facing if he's found guilty? Does that mean he should never play in the NFL again? Are those the consequences that we want to put forth for someone who's done something so egregious, especially if they find all 22 are accurate, right? That's a good question to ask. I'd probably fall at least close on that side, at least significant suspension, at least, some loss of income, some restitution should be made, those kinds of things. But does that mean he should never play again? Does that mean that he's just morally reprehensible and has, we don't believe that as a church. We believe everybody has dignity. A murderer is not just a murderer. They're more than that.
Right.
And is DeShaun Watson more than someone who committed 22 acts of sexual assault? Yeah. And we have to be called upon as Christians to see him in that light and to kind of try to move him and have fraternal correction and move him into the light of a new day.
Yeah, as your friend Father James Martin says we are more than our worst sins that we've committed.
That's right.
So, but the other part of that is we have to own up to our sins.
That's right.
And ask for forgiveness. But it could be possibly a beautiful story if he mea culpas, I'm wrong, asks the Lord in, and then it could be a great story of grace and reconciliation, metanoia, and conversion to say even someone who's allegedly done these things or has done these things turned his life around and now doesn't do those things and is glorifying God by his life in playing of a professional sport. So, yeah, I guess in this conversation, I've been trying to avoid the cancel culture business. Like, we don't cancel people just because they have sinned, but if someone's guilty of something, there has to be accountability for what it is that they've done, keeping in mind that punishment doesn't last forever or ought not to, because what we want to bring about is real conversion and healing so someone could become a new man or a new woman, right?
Yeah. Justice and peace shall kiss, as they say in the scripture.
Yeah.
I think those two things need to come into play here. And so, look, here's what I think in sort of closing this out. I think what do I want to pray for going forth, and what do I want to root for going forth, right? So I want to pray that justice is done, and however that's going to happen as the thing goes on. Pray for the victims of sexual assault of anybody, not just the folks who are alleging that DeShaun Watson did this, but also pray for DeShaun, right? To pray that he may change his ways if there are ways to be changed, and in whatever way he needs us to pray for him so that he could have success here in Cleveland and live a life that he can be proud of. I think that's what I want in the end. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's great that he's a football player, and we want anyone who's playing a sport to play it well, anyone who's a musician to be a good musician. But ultimately, we're made for more than just sports or crafts. It's about being a good, godly, holy human being, so configured to Christ along the way. So that's my deepest prayer for the guy, that he can find his satisfaction and his joy living in the life of the Trinity and being a beloved son of the Father, recognizing that as his primary identity, even for being a Cleveland Brown or whatever else he may consider himself. But yeah, he's hopefully sees himself as a beloved son of the Father, who is a sinner, but whom the Lord has had mercy upon.
From a football standpoint, I'd like to point out Houston has never won anything either, and yeah, he was the leader of them. They haven't exactly won the Super Bowl, so is this the guy who could put them over the top? I'm not even sold on that end. He's a great quarterback, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's got a lot of good pieces around him. I put more faith in guys like Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper and the defense. Yeah. And Stefanski's coaching, I would say, too, than I would put in this guy at this point in time. I don't even know if this guy's going to play it down for the Browns when all this stuff comes to the end, and so I don't think it was really worth the risk in the end, but we'll see.
And I think the jury's still out, although I think Nick Chubb is, as far as I can tell, and again, we don't know everything, we don't see anything, but there's your upstanding guy for the Browns.
Agreed.
And maybe Nick Chubb can do some mentoring of some of these younger guys, like, this is how you play the game, be a good, upstanding citizen, and do your work, and let it be that way. I should also say that when trouble like this happens, it can be a wake-up call to other football players and that you just can't do that sort of activity. Maybe you thought because you were young and you were getting $1 million contract, you could get away with anything. And it's a reminder, no, you can't. Human beings are human beings, and we're all accountable. And none of us are above the law.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that we even have to say that, but yeah, I think that I hope that it's a wake up call to people who think that they just you give a boatload of money to guys who are 20-something years old, who've never controlled that kind of thing, that kind of money before, who've never had that kind of fame, and then you wonder why they do bad things, without any kind of mentoring or and that's not totally true. I mean, I think the NFL does have some kind of mentoring programs in place, but not at the level that they probably need.
my brother was the one who broke the news to me about DeShaun Watson coming to Cleveland. He had texted me just before we started our recording that Evan Mobley, the Cavs rookie, who's awesome, he'll be, perennial all-star. His mother moved to Cleveland with him to have a parental presence here because you've got a 19-year-old, 20-year-old guy who just got a huge contract. Mom's going to be there to make sure you're making good decisions. Yeah. And I don't know, again, DeShaun Watson, what his family background was or who are the people mentoring these professional athletes because they're treated as gods. Yeah. And so a lot of times they probably think I can act as one and they're not, right? And they need parents and they need mentors. And so this has been fruitful, I think, a helpful discussion.
I think so. Longer than our usual podcast. DeShaun Watson, if you're listening, the Cathedral of St. John the Divine is always open for you. It is right up the street from where you make your home in the wonderful stadium that is right around the corner from us. So come on by. We'd love to meet you and see you and pray for you and pray with you.
Yeah, and we promise to pray for you.
And for those who have been victims of sexual assault, we'll put in the show notes the hotline for domestic violence. And we know that we pray for you too. And we hear you and we see you. And we hope that you continue to have the courage to bring forth the stories of those who have been abused unjustly and sexually and physically and all those kinds of things. So please know that you're in our prayers and that we're still thinking of you as well.
May the truth be told and may the truth set us free.
And we'll be back next time with another question of faith.